Hey there, everybody. So it's time to take a look at another one of the math worksheets. This is worksheet number 2 in section 6.3 of your book and Learn, Test, Pass. You can find the worksheet there on Learn, Test, Pass if you haven't already. And done this, you need to go ahead and get the worksheet so that you can do it first before you watch the video, or at bare minimum, do it with me as I go through the video. We're taking a look at the worksheet that deals with interest over the life of a loan. So I'll go ahead and share my screen with you so that we can get started on that. And when we talk about interest paid over the life of the loan, we're really asking, assuming the loan is paid as scheduled. I think people sometimes go off the deep end with all of the assumptions that we make on these things. Well, what if they pay early? What if they make an extra payment? Well, what if? What if? We can't answer those questions. We know if they pay early, they're not going to pay as much interest over the life of the loan. But luckily, you're not going to be asked to calculate that sort of thing on the test. When you're asked about interest over the life of the loan, we are assuming that the loan is going to be paid as scheduled. Regular monthly payments, no more, no less. So let's take a look at this question. It says, what is the total amount that will be repaid by a borrower who obtains a mortgage requiring monthly principal and interest payments of $14.99 to be made for 30 years if the borrower obtained the loan at a 6% annual interest rate? So here's the question right out of the gate. What's the total amount that will be repaid by the borrower? Not total interest, not total principal, but just the total amount that's going to be repaid. Folks, we can use some very simple things here to figure that out. Number one, we know for a fact that we're paying $1,499 a month. That's a good starting point, because if we only made one payment, that's how much we would pay back. But we're not making one payment. As a matter of fact, we're making that payment monthly for all 12 months out of the year. So if we do $1,499 times 12, that would give us our annual repayment. So $1,499 times 12, I'll write this in as monthly here so we can follow along, times 12 equals $17,988 yearly that we're going to pay. And we know that is for 30 years. So times 30 years, that will give us a total repayment on this loan of $539,640. Now, we don't know in this case, we just don't know how much of that is interest and how much is principal, because they didn't give us that information. But it's okay. They didn't ask us for those things. They just said how much is going to be paid back. And the amount that's going to be paid back is $539,640. Notice we did not have to use that 6% annual interest rate at all in this question. And the reason was they already gave us the monthly payment. That 6% interest rate is factored into the monthly payment already. So we're just going to take the monthly payment and run with it. All right. Number 2 says, what's the total amount that will be repaid by a borrower who takes out a $172,000 loan at 5.25% annual interest for 15 years and has monthly principal and interest payments of $1,383? So again, what is the total amount that will be repaid? Okay. Well, a good starting point for repayment is how much we're repaying monthly. So let's write that number down, $1,383 monthly. But we're paying that all 12 months out of the year. And so that tells us $1,383 times 12, that we're paying back $16,596 yearly. And again, for 15 years. So times 15 years, that's a total repayment of $248,940. Well, obviously, that's significantly more, just to highlight this for you, That's significantly more than what we borrowed, which makes sense because when we pay a loan back, we're paying back interest as well as principal. We're paying back $172,000 in principal, but the rest is going to be interest. Now, they did not ask us for that yet. In this question, they said, what is the total amount that will be repaid? So that's the $248,940. Now look at number 3. It says, of the total repayment in question number 2, how much of that repayment is the principal of the loan and how much is the interest that's going to be paid to the lender? Well, the first half of the question is super easy. The first half of the question, they already gave us the answer to. It's $172,000 in principal because principal is the amount borrowed. And we borrowed $172,000. To get to the interest, we got to do a little more work. We got to do some work to get to the interest. So let's talk about the work we have to do to get to the interest. We know that a grand total of $248,940 is being repaid. We know that of that, $172,000 is principal. If we subtract the principal from the total repayment, we will end up with $76,940 in interest once that loan is finally paid back. So assuming that borrower, if you look at the two questions together, assuming that borrower makes every payment on time, never pays $1 extra, just pays $1,383 every single month for 15 years, they will pay back a grand total of $248,940, of which $76,940 is interest. That's the way you think about that loan. Okay. Number 4. Number 4 says Sally is obtaining a 30-year mortgage note in the amount of $215,000 and has been offered a 4.5% annual interest rate from her lender with monthly principal and interest payments of $1,092. Based on this information, how much will Sally repay in principal and how much will she pay in interest over the full life of the loan? So they want us to figure out the total and then break it up into the two pieces. So anytime we're trying to figure out the total, we start with our monthly amount. That monthly amount is the great starting point here. So we're going to look at $1,092 monthly times 12 months a year. And you don't have to really stop. You can just keep going and say straight up times 30 years. Now, if you would rather do the times 12 and get the annual amount and then times 30, that's fine. It's going to be the same answer either way. $1,092 times 12 months a year times 30 years equals $393,120 in total repayment. So that's the grand total of all the repayment on that thing. But they want to know very specifically, how much will Sally repay in principal and how much will she pay in interest? So they want us to break that payment up, or that repayment up into its pieces. So let's take a look at that. $393,120 is our total that's repaid. Well, we already know one of these numbers. We already know, if we pay close attention, the principal number because they told us. So let's write that down. Of that, $215,500 is principal. So there's half our answer right there. How do we get the interest part? We'll just subtract out the principal and whatever is left over is going to be your interest. So $393,120 minus the $215,500 leaves us with $177,620 in interest. So they wanted to know this number and they wanted to know this number. Those are the two numbers they wanted to know. Okay, number 5. says Kenesha has applied for a 15-year note, which has monthly principal and interest payments of $3,835.35. This is based on her having a 5% annual interest rate on her conventional loan. Assuming Kenesha makes all payments as scheduled, how much interest will she pay back to the lender on this $485,000 mortgage note? So there's our question. How much interest? They don't want to know about anything else this time. Just down to the nitty gritty. How much interest is this going to cost Kenesha if she pays this thing all the way back? So we know our starting point has to be that monthly payment. So we got $3,835.35 monthly. And that's always going to be times 12 months a year. And in this case, they said it's a 15-year note. So that's times 15 years. That's going to give us a total repayment, $3,835.35 times 12 times 15. That's a total repayment, folks, of $690,363. Now, that's not the answer they want because they didn't ask us for the total repayment. They ask us how much of that is interest. Well, we can work with that. If we know that the total is $690,363, and we also know right up here that the principal is $485,000. That's the amount that she actually borrowed. Then we can subtract that out to get the interest. So minus $485,000. Kenesha is going to pay $205,363 in interest if she keeps that loan for the full 15 years and makes every payment as scheduled. $205,000 in interest. It's a lot of interest. Adds up. Look at number 6. Terry is purchasing a new construction home using an FHA mortgage note. The purchase price of the property is $326,500, but Terry is making a down payment, which leaves him borrowing $315,000. The lender is offering Terry a 30-year repayment term at 4% annual interest with monthly principal and interest payments of $1,504. Based on this information, how much, there's finally our question, how much will Terry pay in interest over the life of the loan? First of all, here, they've given you way more information. They've given you a lot of garbage in this question, stuff we just don't need. But if we're talking about paying a loan back, we got to start with a monthly payment. And so in this case, we got to start at $1,504 a month. There's our monthly payment every month. So that's 12 months a year. And times, in this case, a 30-year loan. Okay, so that's $1,504 times 12 months a year times 30 years. That is $541,440 in total repayment. But they ask us for how much is just the interest. So now we got to go back and say, all right, well, how much did Terry borrow? We know he paid back $541,440. That's total repayment. How much of that was loaned? How much of that was principal? Well, we got two numbers here. Purchase price of $326,500 or the amount borrowed after the down payment of $315,000. The number we care about, folks, is the amount borrowed. This is a loan question. Purchase price doesn't matter in a loan question. It's the amount borrowed that matters. So it's $315,000 borrowed here, or principal. So when we subtract that out, Terry is going to pay over the life of that loan, $226,440 in interest. $226,440 in interest. That's why it's good to be the bank. All right, number 7. Seth is shopping around for mortgage loans in order to purchase his dream home. The home has a list price of $850,000, but Seth plans to make a sizable down payment of 20% and borrow the remainder. Seth has been offered a 30-year note issued at 4.75% annual interest with monthly PI payments of $3,547.20, or he could take a 15-year note at 4.25% annual interest with monthly PI payments of $5,115.50. Based on this information, what would be the difference in the interest that's paid over the life of these two loans? Well, so here's what we know. No matter which loan Seth takes, he's borrowing the exact same amount. He's borrowing 20% of, or excuse me, borrowing 80% of that $850,000. And the reason we know he's borrowing 80%, it says because he's making a down payment of 20%. So what I would do first if I were you is go ahead and get your loan amount so you don't make that mistake of working with the purchase price or list price, okay? So what I'm going to do is take the $850,000 purchase price, and I'm going to multiply that times 80%. So where did I get 80%? Well, if he's borrowing the remainder, but he's putting 20% down, that leaves 80% to be borrowed. So 850,000 times 80% loan to value, that is a $680,000 loan. Okay. Here's what we know. Whether Seth takes that loan out for 15 years or 30 years, he's borrowing $680,000. The only difference is his payments are bigger if he borrows it for 15 years than if he borrows it for 30 years. And what they're asking us here is compare the two loans. So that's exactly what we're going to do. I'll do purple for the first one. We're going to do the 15-year here, okay? So here's our 15-year. Here's what we know for the 15-year note, right there, 15-year note, and the payments are $35.47.20. So $35.47.20 times 12 months a year times 15 years. Seth is looking at a total repayment on that thing of $638,496. So switch out my color here real quick, and let's talk about the 30-year loan. With the 30-year loan, so here's the 30-year right here. Oops, just realized I made a mistake. We all do it. Made a mistake. Made a mistake. Look at that. The 30-year payment is $35.47.20. So let me write that down. $35.47.20 times, and that's the payment for the 30-year note, and that's going to be times 12 months a year times 30 years. Let me go back over here before I forget and fix this other one, okay? That is not the right payment for the 15-year note, okay? The 15-year note has payments of $5,115.50. So hopefully you had already caught my mistake before I caught my mistake, but it's okay. Don't get frustrated with yourself when you make a mistake. It's easy to do. That's why you continually go back and rescan this thing. So let me redo the math on that 15-year note, okay? $5,115.50 times 12 months a year times 15 years, okay? That's a big number. $920,790 repaid. Now let's look at our 30-year note. If we take a look at our 30-year note, we got $35, $47, and 20 cents times 12 months a year times 30 years. Woo-wee. $1,276,992 on the 30-year note. And here's the question. What's the difference between the two? Well, difference always means subtraction, right? Whenever they say difference of anything, they're talking about subtraction. So let's take a look at the difference between the two. We're going to take that bigger number, the 30-year, $1,276,992, and subtract out the 15-year number, which is $920,790. So what would be the difference between these two loans? Looks like to me Seth would pay an additional $356,202 in interest simply by taking the 30-year route versus the 15-year route. Because remember, Seth is paying back the same $680,000 no matter which way you go, no matter which loan he ends up taking. So here's the decision that Seth has to make. Does he want to pay $5,100 a month, $5,115.50, and end up saving himself $356,000 in interest? Or does he want to pay $3,547.20 a month, which is obviously a much more manageable monthly payment, but pay an extra $356,202 in interest? It's a pretty substantial difference when you look at it like that. And that takes care of that worksheet, folks. That if you can handle certainly number 7, and that's probably more complex than what you could expect to see on the test, but certainly no more complex than that when it comes to interest paid over the life of the loan, because really you had to do interest paid over the life of 2 loans to get to that answer. So if you can handle that, then you're in really, really good shape for the math you're going to see as far as interest paid over the life of the loan. So if you need to watch it again, do so. Practice, practice, practice with the math. Thanks.